Hello and welcome. I'm Lee Peterson. I'm the host of the podcast WDcast, which is called WDcast because it's brought to you by WD Partners, whose tagline is innovation at scale, which means that WD has services that range from strategy, design, digital, and operations to architecture and construction management. End to end, they're at WDpartners.com. Thanks, WD, for sponsoring the show. In a second, about the mission of the show. On WDcast, we want to talk about the burning platforms of the 21st century and the plethora of challenges involved. We're not so concerned about what the business itself is, as you'll see today, but as long as it's on fire. And so, as you might imagine, there is a lot to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about the ins and outs of modern retail, which means all kinds of crazy things like store closings, physicals becoming .coms becoming physical, food halls, failed department stores, and of course, pop-up stores. And I have with me, via phone from New York City, the heart of it all, someone who has spent years involved in such matters by reporting on, advising, and creating within retail, but now owns her own retail consultancy, Melissa Gonzalez. Melissa is the founder and CEO of the Lionesque Group, who, according to Google, are pop-up retail architects. Melissa, thank you very much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. A little disclaimer before we get going. The thoughts and opinions expressed today belong to the members of this discussion and do not necessarily represent those of the companies that they work for, which would be Lionesque and WD in this case. Okay, Melissa, your background is pretty amazing. And it reads like a story of the modern retail trail. And it looks to me like you saw current issues coming a long time before they actually arrive, and you are now in a super relevant place. But could you indulge us a little bit and tell us about that road and how you chose what you chose and basically, how you got here?
Sure. So my background before starting the Lioness Group is I worked in institutional equity sales, helping make markets, help pitch ideas for equity stocks to the buy side. But on the flip side, I was also hosting a music show on BET and producing indie films. So I always had this right-left battle.
Wow. That's impressive.
It was actually strategic because when I would call to pitch a stock, I always had an in about what we filmed for the weekend or something else that was more interesting to them. So it was easier to get people to pick up the phone, and then I would segue into my stock pitch. But
got it.
But I left 10 years ago, January 2009, because I just really wanted to pursue more creative endeavors. And at the time, I didn't really know what exactly that would be. I was more focused, to be honest, in TV film. But at the time when I had created a web series, I had filmed it with somebody whose family owned real estate in Midtown Manhattan. And he said to me, we have vacant space. Do you want to partner and do something creative? And so I was in a serendipitous time where I had time and there wasn't necessarily an upfront cost because they owned the real estate. And I said, sure, why not? Let's give it a try. So that was in September of 2009, 10 years ago, where we embarked on experimenting with our first pop-up store for a brand who's still a client today, our first client. And we learned very quickly that there was a need for this sort of format. In the beginning, it was a lot of emerging brands who couldn't otherwise afford a permanent store. So it was a little bit different. E-commerce wasn't what it is today. Shopify was just becoming a thing. But at the end of the day, it was really about creating space for these brands to tell a story. And at that scale, it was really obvious that the human connection drove that. Because when I think of NFP, the brand that was our first client, what was exciting for consumers about it was the opportunity to meet this amazing designer and talk to her one-on-one. And she guided you through the fit of the clothes. And those relationships that she established back then, many of them are her super customers today. So it's really an evolution of that on a smaller scale. And then as the industry has changed, continuing to adapt with that. And I think, what we've been talking about for 10 years has just really come to fruition.
That's really interesting. And, I'm going to ask you what probably a million people would ask you, but once you were in TV and film and being successful down that road, what was it about retail that lured you into like pop-up stores? Was it the vacancy of need, or?
You know what? I asked myself that question for a long time too. I did. At one point I was like, how did I end up here? Like, I didn't leave Wall Street necessarily to do this. And I said, like, what makes me wake up and just want to do this all the time? And at the end of the day, it's kind of this happy mix of being able to fuel that creative spirit, because we're storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what attracted me to the film TV industry, is being able to tell stories. But I'm also able to lean in on my business acumen, having worked on Wall Street, and understanding that the two have to coexist, because there's ROI to account for, and financial planning with these stores. And so being able to come from both point of views has just been really exciting.
Well, I think too, there's sort of a blue ocean there, especially 2009 in the recession, because, a lot of retailers for the previous 30 years had signed into, leases that were 25 years long, and they were building out hundreds and hundreds of stores, and obviously overstored. And all of a sudden, there's this opportunity to create something and pop it up at the right time of year, with the right merchandise, get sort of a brand message across. I mean, I wish I would have known you then.
It's never too late, but what's interesting though is the reasons just continue to evolve. When I wrote my book, The Pop-Up Paradigm, years later in 2015, I wrote a whole section about goals, because there's not just one reason a brand does a pop-up. And when I speak about some of those first clients, there was a clear reason. This was what they were capable of, was signing that short-term lease. They couldn't commit to something for 10 years, never mind 25.
Right.
But now you're kind of seeing things are changing and moving at such a rapid speed. Brands on average, especially D2C brands, which is a big portion of our client base, they don't know who they're going to be in 5 years yet, right? They've launched online, they've hit a certain scale, a certain revenue mark, and they want to scale the connection they have with consumers, but they're still evolving as a company themselves. So the needs that they're going to have for square footage or inventory and all of that is going to evolve. So it's kind of hard for them to double down on those bets without even dipping their toes first and using pop-ups to test the viability of what works and what doesn't before committing longer term. Sure.
And at the end of the day, the pop-up may be it, actually. If you think about it, if I could open a store, if I did, and this is true for a lot of retailers where, they do 70% of their business in December, but they're paying rent, 11 months hence. Another thing, we did like a simple math equation, and for $1 billion company with a few hundred stores, and at the rate things are going now, both in terms of e-com and physical sales decreasing, e-com like exponentially growing. Within 5 or 6 years, if you're a $1 billion company, you're going to be doing a lot more sales online than you are with stores. So the evolution of the physical place is an experiment now. And pop-up stores are right at the heart of it for the reasons that we just discussed.
For sure. And when we kind of help mastermind the pop-up experience, because of that notion, what we work with our clients closely on is how are we tracking success? Because although there's growth in e-commerce, there's still a significant attribution to those sales from the physical experience. Yeah. So we just need to evolve what the purpose of physical is and what that experience looks like and how it satisfies a different need than the transactional experience that happens online or through your phone. And really thinking through that whole omni-channel experience, the customer channel experience really, and how they complement each other.
And we're in a phase right now too, I think, where there's a transition in terms of leadership, where, consider like digital natives and digital immigrants predominantly are running these companies, especially big ones. And it's difficult, I think, for them to swallow the notion that you're going to have a physical space that's more brand oriented and people are just going to shop online. You could do eventually, I'm not making any predictions, but, within 10 years, you could do 80% of your business online, but you still need that sort of brand image or, brand touch point in a lot of different places, in a lot of different forms.
That's right. Because we're inundated so much with options online now, right?
Yeah.
And the average attention span is so fast now. The most recent quote is like 3 seconds. So you need to create those opportunities where you can engage deeper with consumers. That's what adds to the stickiness of the relationship. That's why I say the purpose of the store can continue to evolve. And when you think of cost too,
Right.
some of it may even out a little bit because you'll still have to invest in design, but your operational strategy will be different. And on an ongoing basis, like that's a significant cost for companies. So if you're doing less inventory and you're focused more on partners and events and other things, you can kind of be a little bit more strategic about how you approach the business plan of it.
Yeah. And another huge factor, I think, is labor.
Yeah, exactly. It's the biggest line item.
Right. And it's the first thing you cut. I know I ran stores for a long time, and even on a corporate level, the first thing they'll do is, your regional manager or your district manager will call you up and say, okay, this week, you got to cut by 20% because they've projected that they're going to do a little bit less, or the latest line that landed didn't do as well. So it was all about payroll, but with a lot of different forms of retail, and even now, like in food, the ghost kitchen factor or the dark stores factor. I mean, the labor model is completely different than it used to be.
Yeah.
So Lionesque, I couldn't help but look at that and think, where'd you get that name? What's that all about?
Which is funny because we just spoke about this in the office yesterday. So I am a Leo, and in high school I was a Leonia lion, and in college I was a Nittany lion. So it's definitely been a through line. So that's where it came from. And the esque was to make it a little bit more feminine as a female founder. But I think there's a tenacity and a fierceness that we use when we approach the work that we do with passion. And so the through line continues there as well.
Interesting. It was super interesting. No matter where so you can't get away from lions. Is what
I can't, but that's okay. I'm a proud Leo, so.
Yeah. And as we know now, female lions are really the leaders of the pack, right?
They are.
Male lions just kind of lay around and do nothing.
It's true.
We'll let that sit for a while. So you've said this already, I think, in a number of different ways. But what do you think of where retail's at right now? Like, what's at a high level, what do you think the state is?
I mean, it's in a transitional place. Everybody talks about the death of it and the apocalypse, and it's just through history you'll see the cyclicality of it, and whether or not we have a recession, and there'll continue to be changes. But at the end of the day, we inherently are consumers. We consume things from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to sleep. That's fact, and that's not going to change. But what we expect out of brands and retailers that we're developing a relationship continues to evolve. And so brands and retailers need to adjust with that. And the ones that do and make a concerted effort to, they're going to be the successful ones. And the ones who don't, they're going to continue to see hard times.
Yeah. I was recently asked on a NRF podcast, and the first question was, is there really a retail apocalypse? And I said, yeah, there is, for people that haven't adjusted. For people that haven't made the move to what retail, or even moved towards what retail is going to be, they're hurting, like really hurting. They don't have the wherewithal, or, again, leadership, and especially digital immigrant leadership, I think, is in a sorry way.
Yeah, I mean, the D2C brands, right? They can be more nimble, and so it's easier for them to affect change than a big corporate structure, right? Where there's lots of layers and legacy systems, and there's a very intense systemized approach that has to happen. But that cultural change has to happen internally, like
Yeah.
what you're.
Yeah.
Without that cultural change, then you don't see change.
And we see that all the time. I think where we hear, okay, we want retail of the future, and when we actually show them retail of the future and what it would look like, maybe a store that is now three-quarter delivery center, they don't like it, and so I think that there's a mental shift and. Like an age shift almost too.
Right.
I can almost see like millennials start taking over these bigger businesses. Everything's going to change. And
Yep.
and speaking of that, Amazon. So everybody talks about Amazon, and now they're starting to talk about regulation and things like that. But I've always kind of been an admirer in that. And anytime I've never even heard of, I've been in retail a pretty long time, and I've never even heard of a business that grew over $100 billion within 3 years. But they did it, and I think that the talk of them being a monster or a game changer, I have a tendency to listen or to lean towards the game changer side. What about you guys? What do you guys think?
I mean, we definitely see them as an industry leader, and full disclosure, yes, they're a client of ours, but even before then, I use Amazon on a regular basis, and they have done a lot to move the industry forward. They've done a lot to kind of unlock what's possible for consumers as far as access, speed, technological advancements. And so I think in a way, there's always a need for somebody like that in the industry. Somebody's got to push things forward.
Yeah.
So, you have Amazon and tech, you had Google, you have Microsoft, and it's just necessary. And sometimes when you're the leader in innovation like that, there's going to be backlash for sure. I think that that's kind of par for the course. But they bring a lot to the table. And there are a lot of advantages that some of the smaller retailers do get to see from being on their platform as well, as far as like getting access to all the eyeballs. I mean, when you search for a product, how often do you go straight to Amazon versus Google to search for it? And now you're getting visibility to all that as a brand.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I think if we didn't have Amazon, we still have thousands and thousands of stores. And what's interesting about that too is when you go to countries like I just did that don't have it. First of all, there's panic, but part of the panic when you really get down into it and talk to them about it, like specifically why are you afraid of Amazon, is because they know that they'll have to change. They know that they'll have to really kind of move it forward. So I'm with you on that. And then on the other side of the coin, we have department stores, and I grew up in specialty retail, so I've kind of always hated them. How do you feel about department stores? Do you see any future there, or what would the future be, you think, for those guys?
I mean, you're definitely seeing a lot of evolution there. I do personally prefer the boutique experience as well, and I think what's harder is that we're just so booked, like we're overbooked as consumers all the time. So the average time we spend in a store or in a shopping center and all that is beginning to decrease more and more because we have less time. And so we're more purposeful now when we go somewhere, right? Unless you've captured our mind with something really experiential. And that's a challenge for department stores because it's harder for me to run in and out the way I could to a single brand experience. But I think that there's those that are really pushing. Nordstrom, I've always admired. Again, disclaimer, they're a client. But even before then, I think that they continue to be forward thinking in how they approach retail. I think it's very interesting the way they've approached entering the New York market. And I think others are having struggles because they kind of are band-aiding situations, isolation versus thinking holistically. And then outside of the traditional department stores, it's interesting to see what like the show fields of the world and neighborhood goods of the world are doing and their iteration of what a department store can be.
Yeah, the new department store.
Yes.
And there's also, and Macy's is testing beta At least they
Mm-hmm.
were the last time I was in Macy's, right there on like 34th and 7th. And
Correct.
to me, something like that, you would think it would be something that they could really gravitate to, that being showroom stores, which is,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of a lot of pop-up in it, where you have a store, you scan it, you ship it to your house, and then, the point that you were talking about, which is crucial, like I only have X amount of minutes. If they had one floor that you could just walk through quickly, scan things, and have them sent to your house, and especially in a place like New York City, I think that'd be a huge advantage. But again, to everything that we just talked about, they would have to make that kind of big delta decision.
Yeah, exactly.
So Henry Ford supposedly said, if I'd have given my customers what they wanted, I would have given them a faster horse. And yet right now, I think the zeitgeist is, everything revolves around the customer. We do everything for them, which Brian Cornell just said at Shop Talk. Who do you think is right, Mr. Ford or Brian Cornell?
I want to say both,
Yeah.
because everybody wants things faster. So in that sense, it might not be a horse, but Henry Ford is like, what what they want inherently is the speed. So I think that that's right. But at the end of the day, it's really about listening to your customer. And I think as we continue to evolve, it's going to be about personalizing experiences to each customer more and more. And as we continue to fuse digital experiences with physical experiences, that's going to be something that brands and retailers are going to have to deliver. They might need to do it by layering in AR or VR into the store experience, or having a way for them to be identified when they walk in the room, and the sales team automatically knowing who you are, what you've bought in the past, what you love, like really bringing in experience that I hear you, I know you, I get you, I service you. So I think that that's really where we're going to continue to go.
Yeah, maybe a more relevant one than Ford at this time is Supreme.
Oh yeah.
And, I just recently read that they put out a big red travel chest, and on it they put a sign that said something like, "Dear loyal customers, if you are stupid enough to buy this, then you deserve to have it," or something like that. And they sold out in a day. They'd be more along the lines, I think, of the modern Henry Ford, where they're just creating things for their customer base, for their fan base, and leading. Apple is the same way. Like we're going to lead the customer, listen to them at the same time, to your point. But I think there's certain companies that lead more than listen. And those two examples, I think, are more current than Henry. But and as you might be able to tell, I'm a little prejudiced towards the Henry Ford side. I think there's so much data going on, and I worked for a large specialty retailer, and we used to stare at data all day long and finally I said, you know what, we're buying more of the red. That's just it.
Yeah.
I just feel better about that. And along the same lines as that, I read something in HBR, a study that found that the disruptor of industries, after studying the industries themselves, and unlike general belief, is in fact not technology or the data, it's the customer itself. What do you think of that? Like the customer as the disruptor?
I'm going to disagree. I do think that technology continues to reshape consumer behavior. And so from that, consumers affect the shift. So, there's obviously people who create the technology, but that's what unlocks the possibility, right? We now know voice shopping exists because of Alexa.
Yeah.
We now know that, VR exists or AR exists or personalization exists, or so those things reshape our expectations of what's possible. And once we learn that that's what's possible, it shifts our behavior. And then that becomes the new norm to us. So that's why, it's so important that brands and retailers are listening to that, because if I think of my life, I wake up, I can ask Alexa the weather. I can ask her to connect to Starbucks and pre-order me my coffee through the Starbucks app. I have access to information at my fingertips at all times. Like, that's the world I'm living in today. And when I walk into a store, I don't expect that fluidity to stop. But it's because of the possibilities of technologies that I've been now remolded that way. And I think, and even while for us, it feels different. If I think of my daughter who's 4 years old, like, she's born on this stuff. That is the norm.
Right.
It's the norm, but it is the technology that exists that has created what she thinks is normal.
So and that was my next question, but so in terms of AI, you're all for it.
I mean, I think that there's a slippery slope with it.
Yeah.
I think that, as long as you're doing it with the consumer at the heart of it and the benefits to them, I think there's a lot of good that can come out of it, but it's a slippery slope with data collection and how you go too far with that, how transparent you are with consumers about it. I think that those are really important aspects of it, and it's a gray area. So that's the tricky part.
Yeah, I think it is it's there's just so much we don't know. I mean, it could even be used in the military, and that's kind of really scary as well. My wife is an anti-Alexa. I told her I want like 8 of them around the house, just like you. Like, I just want to ask it, what's the temperature outside, or, whatever.
I mean,
and she's like, they're listening. And I'm like, so what? To what? Like me crunching Cheerios or something?
Yeah. I mean, you can always unplug it in between if you were worried, but I get it. It's the same thing. It's like, if you're going to be, it's like you got to interact with the world. So just like you're online, everything you do online, they're seeing that every keystroke, every search that you make, every purchase that you make, it's being tracked in the same way. I believe my Apple phone listens. There's how many times have you spoken about something, and then next time you go to Safari, you see an ad relevant to a conversation you had. Like,
right.
So it's happening for sure, and it's definitely a weird place. But you also can't disconnect from the world. So I think as long as we find a balance, that's what's really important.
I used to like to screw them up. I'd purchase like classical music and then some hip hop, like in the same buy, and then what they would show back to me was semi-humorous. But yeah. Okay, so back to the personal just for a second. I heard a rumor from somebody that knows you that you've actually acted before, which I don't think you mentioned.
I want to know who told you this, but it is true. While I was working on Wall Street, that was part of that creative side. So I was producing, and I was also performing. I have a finance and Spanish degree from Penn State, but then I also have a theater degree from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Oh.
But they complement each other, right?
Yeah.
If I am moderating a panel or if I'm presenting, I can kind of tap into some of those acting skills. But yeah, that kind of just goes back to really loving storytelling. And that's what I keep in my head as the mantra when I'm working with my design team of what is the experience we're going to create and how we build that human connection. And what is it that we're looking to convey and how are we going to do that visually?
So you're probably also really great at a pitch, because that's totally acting.
I think so. I try to be.
I mean, you honestly believe in something, and so you have to do some convincing, but you have to have some confidence in order to be able to do that.
For sure, absolutely.
Okay, so how about a bold prediction for 2020? I've made some notes like, are we going to have a recession? Is Macy's going to be Chapter 11? Do you have any? What's your boldest prediction for 2020?
I know. I was thinking about that. What is my bold prediction? I mean, I don't know if it's bold, but I do think we're due for a market correction.
Yeah. So
will it be as steep as a recession? I'm not sure, but I think that there will be some correction happening. It's that 10-year mark.
Yeah.
And so it's coming.
Well, and I think 10 years is a record, right? I mean, yeah, some kind of record. So, and anything else you'd like to add before we go to a quick little lightning round?
Oh, I don't know. We spoke about so many things.
Yeah.
I think, really, you asked me the bold prediction in general. And one thing we're always thinking about is, okay, we talked about pop-ups 10 years ago and it's become kind of mass now, and experiential is here. And, now what's next? What's the evolution going to continue to be as the consumer continues to evolve? So that's something that we're actively thinking about and keeping top of mind here as we're working on initiatives with our clients and for ourselves.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in showroom stores, and when we've tested those with consumers, just the idea of it, and said, what about Dyson or Bonobos or these guys that have already been successful at it, and there's a higher degree of desire for showroom stores than just about anything that we've tested before. Yet we really haven't seen that on a larger scale, and to me that sort of feels a little nexty, but again, like everything we talked about, I think there's got to be a lot of changes and mentally and physically in order to get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this lightning round, which I think I need to change the name of that. I don't know if it's something else. But say kind of the first thing that comes to your mind about what I'm going to ask you. Okay?
Sure.
Okay. Arianna Huffington.
Thought leader.
Oh, yeah. I got to say that's true. What's she doing right now? She's doing something really interesting.
Thrive Global. She launched Thrive Global. We actually had the honor of being a partner on their launch of their pop-up store simultaneous with their website back in 2015. But really being a thought leader in the mental wellness space, which is an important topic today.
Yeah, sure enough. I love her. Fave city.
New York City, born, bred, always will be loyal to it.
No kidding. Where'd you grow up?
I was born in the Bronx, and then for high school, my family moved to a small town in New Jersey right over the George Washington Bridge. And then right after I graduated college, I moved into Manhattan.
The news. What do you think of the news?
I mean, I'm always trying to look at the news is so depressing. I mean, it's just so much crazy stuff happening. So I always I'm looking for the goat yoga story. Like I just want happy, especially the morning news. I just woke up.
I don't know if I can go on. I could use a goat yoga story too.
I mean, I've done it. It's very therapeutic.
Bezos.
Innovator.
Washington Square.
The puppy park. I'll always think of the puppy park because I used to go to Washington Square Park when I first got my Jack Russell. And we spent a lot of time there.
Washington Square used to be one of my favorite places when I lived in New York. Favorite food?
Peanut butter / chocolate. It's a toss-up.
Oh, and the combo, so it's called a Buckeye.
Oh, yeah.
I think you got to be from here to know that. Yeah, they produce, this is the Buckeye State, Ohio, and they produce these little candies that are peanut butter surrounded by chocolate. And once it hardens, it's like, magic.
Oh, that sounds good. I got to get that.
Yeah, just order some Buckeyes and you'll be happy. You are addicted to?
I love animal videos. I feel like I've mentioned animals a lot here, but I find myself they just evoke joy,
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen some that have gone viral. I don't know if you saw the dog who was getting his nails clipped and then just kind of like passed out because didn't want that to happen. Didn't really. Or did like the cat videos. I mean, I'm a dog lover, but in general, just animal videos are just so funny.
That's really true. I didn't think about it. I mean, they use them on TV shows now too. So just a kind of a break in the news. Here's a cat video.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We all just need that. It's just like happy, a happy place a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you, Melissa. You've been super gracious. Much appreciated for taking the call and dealing with some tech problems that we had at first.
Tech works till it doesn't, but we figured it out.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we weren't going to let it get us. Okay, people, be sure and listen next week for some more human interactions on hot topics. And I don't just mean cat videos. But Also, be sure and subscribe to this podcast. WDcast is at wdpartners.com. You go to the menu hamburger and hit what we think. Then you go to the very bottom of that page in the center and hit the podcast icon and pick one. We have a bunch of great ones in there, including a conversation with Alexa and Google, Huntington Bank, Waze, and many more. And now Lionesque. So much appreciated. We will talk to you guys next week.